Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight. We're proud to present the Emperor's New Clothes as part of the IAM Weekend Planet Earth's edition, Cultivating Responsible Tech for Climate Action and Justice. We will be exploring digital fashion and sustainability, looking at the environmental and social aspects of it. My name is Christina Thiele, and I'm one of the founding members of the Digital Maker Collective. A little bit about the Digital Maker Collective. We are a voluntary, informal research and development group made up of University of the Arts London staff, student, alumni, who share common goals in exploring digital and emerging technologies in the context of arts, practice, education, society, and the creative industries. Founded and led by Chris Follows, who is here amongst us today, the UAL's Emerging Technologies Manager. Forced online during the pandemic, we explored the immersive web and hosted a number of events, one of which was the Digital Fashion Immersive Roundtable, addressing different themes associated with digital fashion with international industry experts. Tonight's event is the continuation of this. And the event will conclude with an immersive digital fashion showcase created by members of the DMC, responding to real data on the climate crisis, predicting carbon emissions up to 2030. So over to Ash.
Thanks, Christina. My name is Ashwini Deshbande, and I'm a digital fashion designer and fashion tech entrepreneur. I currently work as the head of 3D design and production at digital-only fashion brand Republic. I previously founded a fashion software company, Artsy, which was featured in Forbes, The Evening Standard, the Microsoft Podcast, Grazia, Wonderland, and more. I'm a graduate of London College of Fashion, and I've been an active member of the Digital Maker Collective for over a year now. Over to Owen.
Yes, hello everyone. My name's Erin Davies. I'm a member of the Digital Maker Collective and multidisciplinary creative, working at the intersection of fashion and technology with a focus on sustainability. Using a wide range of mediums, both physical and digital, I create immersive experiences for forward-thinking brands and cultural institutions. Through my research-led practice, I aim to bring bold and innovative ideas to life, connecting audiences in meaningful ways and inspiring positive change.
And back to me. So my name is, as I said, Christina Thiele. I'm the co-founder of ArtsXR, an immersive production studio here in London, the UK, and I'm also an associate lecturer at the University of the Arts London. I am a spatial designer and a VR immersive experience creative with a background in photography. As a co-founder of a new immersive studio, pushing the key strategic objective, engaging with global cultural organizations, museums, and institutions, developing projects which challenge geographical, financial, and political barriers, especially in challenging pandemic times post-2020. We're also consulting arts and fashion clients on clean NFTs and the emerging crypto art market within the metaverse. Over to Julianne.
Hi everyone, my name is Julianne Kahl. I'm the founder of the Responsive Fashion Institute. I'm a designer, I'm a researcher, and I'm focusing on the future of fashion. The Institute is based in Munich, and we create digital fashion and applications in immersive spaces to promote sustainability. And we created the space where we are now, but we're going to talk about that later. I develop and implement research projects in the fashion sector, link these with environmental policies, and in the course of my long-standing teaching and teaching practice, I designed models and methods for national and international educational institutions. And in 2016, I initiated the first fashion hackathon in East Africa that was in Addis Ababa, which won the London College of Fashion Better Lives Award. And I'm happy to introduce you Paula today. Paula, up to you.
Thanks, Juliane. Hey everyone, my name is Paula Esvine. I'm 20 years old and studying artificial intelligence in the 5th semester at the Technical College Ingolstadt near Munich. I've been very interested in fashion since I was very young, and that's why I'm currently doing a 6-month work experience at the Responsive Fashion Institute, exploring the subjects of digital fashion and data in more depth. Thank you.
Now on to our wonderful speakers that we have with us today. Kostas Kazansis focuses on game engine technology, 3D design, and XR to reshape fashion and art content dissemination. His background lies at the intersection between fashion media production, visual communication, and computer science. Through his practice, Kostas provides insight on how emerging media can shape new ways of engaging with diverse audiences within arts and fashion ecologies. As a creative technologist at London College of Fashion's Fashion Innovation Agency, Kostas develops proof of concepts for 3D, AR, VR, and creates visuals, renders, and animations to visualize and communicate ideas to diverse partners.
So next up is Mary. Mary Thrift is a designer with a background in sustainable fashion, having worked for 5 years as head of design and production for upcycled vintage brand Attica, London. Following an MA at LCF, where she specialized in AI design and digital prototyping, she now works as technical designer at Vollebak, a menswear brand who use science and technology to make the future of clothing happen faster.
Next on to James Garber. James has a 22-year career in fashion spanning the UK, Middle East, and Asia. Starting life off as a designer and stylist who graduated from Brighton University, James has had the pleasure of working with brands such as Chanel, Burberry, Tom Ford, LVMH, Balenciaga, and Net-a-Porter, to name but a few. In recent years, he's been working to set up Republique, the world's first digital virtual luxury fast fashion brand built at the intersection of creativity, technology, and sustainability. On to Julianne.
Thanks, Ash. Yes, I just wanted to introduce you briefly the space we're in today. The Responsive Fashion Institute creates digital fashion application in immersive spaces to promote sustainability, and through applied research, the institute prototypes new forms and versions of fashion with a focus on social, ecological, and economical sustainability. This immersive space we're in here today was created by the immersive production studio ArtsXR last year as part of a research project on AI in fashion. Due to the pandemic, the research was forced into the digital space, but we wanted to explore other options beyond video calls. The objective was to create an environment that has a positive impact on the user, so aspects of the current psychological and technological research has been included in the process of building the environment. It is a space where the issue of data ethics, digital fashion, and sustainability are being addressed and openly discussed. We are currently working on the next project phase to store information in this space. And being part of the DMC, we invited members to experience the space and participate in workshops. It is great to host this event in this space now and fill it with information and data of the current discourse of digital fashion and sustainability. Ash, over to you again.
Thanks, Julianne. So to start off, let's begin with a little introduction to digital fashion, as some of you may be familiar with the term, but some of you may not be. Digital fashion is clothing that is made completely digitally, using a sort of fashion CAD software, such as Clo3D or Browseware. That can then be used in multiple ways. I think of digital fashion as a tool that can be used for 3 different things, roughly. 1, to optimize the supply chain for physical fashion design and production. 2, as an alternative wardrobe choice for social media, where the outcome is a 2D picture or video. 3 is as a 3D wardrobe choice for your virtual self or avatar in immersive spaces such as this one. So Mary, you work as a technical designer and you have an understanding of digital fashion and you use digital fashion software. For our viewers who are unfamiliar with the software behind digital fashion, can you give us a sort of brief explanation of what it is and how it's used? And also maybe tell us a bit about the impact that it's having or can potentially have on physical fashion and supply chains.
Yeah, sure. So I think where people may have heard of digital fashion, as you say, is in the context of digital garments, where the consumer can buy and wear things in a digital space. But the area that I really focus in on is the bit before it reaches the consumer. So design development and digital prototyping. And So digital prototyping is when you construct a 3D digital version of a garment, and then you can fit that to a particular body shape or size, or make design changes without actually making anything physically. So I would say the two main softwares which are used in the industry are Clo, as you mentioned, and Optitext. And from my experience, Clo is more likely to be used by designers, as it's very flexible with how you use it and it's very visual. And Optitext maybe is used more by factories and manufacturers. But I mean, there's lots of other technologies out there. Lectra, for example, who do digital pattern cutting software, also have a 3D part to their software. So yeah, it's a real growing market. And I think the main ways, the second part of your question, that it sort of impacts the traditional supply chain, is that when you can digitally sample something and you can see it animated, you can really see how the fabric might react, and colorways, and try different fabrics and all this sort of thing. So it cuts down on the physical sampling that you have to do. So yeah, you can either make full garments and cut down on the amount of prototypes, because you may be doing 4 or 5 prototypes typically in the industry, whereas with digital prototyping, perhaps you can cut that down to 2. But you can also create silhouettes maybe, or pocket details if you don't have time to do a whole garment. So yeah, it's a very versatile software.
Thanks, Mary. Those are some really great insights, so thank you for that. So moving on to use case number 2, as I mentioned. So moving on to digital-only fashion. James, at Republic, you create digital-only fashion for social media. So do you make any physical clothing at all? And if not, how does it work? What is the purpose of it? I mean, I obviously know because I work for you, but if you can explain that to everyone else.
It feels really weird answering this question from you, of all people. Yeah, listen, guys. We're a digital-only fashion brand. So our supply chain exists in pixels on computers and iMacs. As a business, we are, and I am constantly being asked whether or not we are planning to bring out a physical range or physical garments, and we are approached literally several times a month by manufacturers who are wanting to turn our digital garments into physical clothing. And the answer, I'm afraid, has to be a firm no, because that goes against our complete ethos as a business. We are fundamentally built around 3 pillars of creativity, technology, and then the big one being sustainability. We firmly believe that digital clothing is as sustainable clothing can ever be, certainly today, and therefore we are sticking firmly to our guns and in the digital space. How it works, I think, is for those of you that don't know, it's relatively straightforward. A consumer comes onto our site, identifies a garment or garments that they like, and then at point of purchase, they upload a photo of themselves, and then we digitally tailor that photo with the garment that they've just bought for them to then push out on social media. I guess our target audience is typically female, Gen Z. Our sweet spot is between 17 and 23 years old. And they live their lives through a social lens, and I guess kind of care more about how they look on social media than they do in the realms of the real world. So we see ourselves as, I guess, more of a kind of content creator, or helping Gen Z consumers to ultimately look good and feel good, where it matters most today, which is online.
Thanks, James. Super interesting, and I couldn't agree more, obviously. So moving on, Kostas, we've spoken about digitizing the supply chain. We've spoken about physical fashion. Digitizing supply chain for physical fashion, and about digital fashion for social media. Can you tell us a bit more about digital fashion for the metaverse in kind of layman terms, and what stage this is at right now?
Definitely, of course, yeah. Digital fashion, I think that digital fashion is becoming ever more relevant while we shift closer to the future. And this is because of the way that we are consuming and disseminating media, and the fact that it's changing, this way is changing and is becoming reintroduced within the post-digital era, if you prefer that term. We've seen a series of examples of brands experimenting with these kinds of digital tools and replacing traditional pathways with emerging ones. Even like from a perspective of big brands like Balenciaga, they've done lots of experimentation with volumetric capture, game engine technology, also artificial intelligence, but also emerging brands as well. And in that context, I think that this is going to become gradually even more important, and we're going to see it much more as we become part of gamified metaverse experience as physical. Actually, we are acquiring like more and more in material space within the metaverse space. So gradually, we're going to be seeing more and more of these types of experiences. I think it's really interesting to consider the fact that younger generations, we're going to reach a point where younger generations won't be able to understand the fact that we had a screen, a cell phone, an iPad or whatever, but the screen as a dimension to interact with the digital world. The physical and the digital worlds are going to be seamlessly blended with each other, and it's going to be very difficult for us to discern and distinguish the distinctions between these two realities. And in that context, I think that is very interesting and fascinating to explore the ways through which we are going to be disseminating context in a reality like that, where we will be acquiring more and more immaterial space, and we're going to be much more than our physical selves. And in that context, I believe that this is the way through which we're going to see more projects which were related to bridging fashion and technology. One really important thing there is the fact that we need to see more advancements in technology for brands to be able to adopt these techniques widely. And the biggest game changer, for my opinion, in that field is real-time cloth simulation. So when our devices are going to become integrated, like smart glasses or whatever, and we will be able to be completely immersed into hybrid worlds, real-time cloth simulation is basically going to identify the way through which we're going to be able to superimpose digital layers of clothing on top of actual people. And there's currently lots of research that's been done in the field, but it's still not at this point where fashion as a whole can adopt this kind of pipeline. So I think that in the next few years, research more related to AI-empowered real-time cloth simulation will identify the shift and the pave towards the future.
Thank you, Kostas. That's fascinating, and it's so great to get your opinion. I mean, we all know the amazing work that the Fashion Innovation Agency is doing in this space. So moving on, I'm going to hand over to Owen, who's going to delve a bit deeper into the environmental impact of digital fashion. Over to you, Owen.
Thank you so much, Ashwini, and to our speakers. That was amazing. So as Ash said, we will now be addressing the environmental impact of digital fashion. As some of you may be aware, the fashion industry is one of the most harmful in the world. It is responsible for 10% of annual global carbon emissions and 20% of all industrial water pollution. These shocking statistics have helped give rise to a pioneering new model of fashion in recent years, one that is more people and planet friendly, digital fashion. Unlike the clothes we are used to, digital fashion doesn't exist in the real world and therefore produces very little waste, if any at all. According to a study by leading digital fashion house The Fabricant, a digital garment equals a 96% reduction of CO2 emissions than a physical one. As a result, both emerging and established designers have downed traditional tools in favor of this innovative approach, recognizing the huge potential it offers to help solve the industry's environmental problems, a shift that has only accelerated during the pandemic. With that being said, I'm delighted to be joined by our wonderful speakers in the field to ask them a few questions. So actually, my first question is for you, Ash. Seeing as you are a digital fashion designer, I wanted to know what inspired you to make the change from working with physical fashion to digital fashion, and how much of the environment was a factor in that?
So I was always interested in fashion, and I never really saw the unsustainable side of fashion until I went to fashion school. And then while I was at London College of Fashion, I came across so many issues that fashion has. And I realized that I couldn't continue to be part of the problem, and I needed to find a way to be part of the solution. And digital fashion, that's when I found out about it. And it was perfect, because being a digital designer allows me to be part of the solution. where I'm making the industry more sustainable rather than contributing to overproduction. And the environmental factor was definitely a big part of my decision, I'd say 90% of my decision to be a digital fashion designer. But the other 10%, I think, comes from digital fashion just allowing complete creativity. There are no boundaries when it comes to digital fashion in terms of the fabrics that you use, in terms of, even in terms of prototyping and things. It's just there are no boundaries. You can do crazy things. You can make clothes out of water if you want to. And I find that so incredible. And that's why I chose to become a digital designer.
Yeah, I agree. That is incredible that 90% of your decision was based around the environment, as you said. So my next question is for Kostas. Ash touched upon it earlier. The Fashion Innovation Agency is arguably one of the most influential organizations in the world of fashion and technology. The group is often cited in articles by major publications. And so I would love to know, Kostas, what the view of the FIA is on digital fashion's potential to serve as a solution to the industry's environmental problems.
Of course, to give a little bit of context at the Fashion Innovation Agency, we usually approach our projects from 3 different pillars. So we like to see how designers make their collections, how they showcase their collections, and how they sell their collections. And we bring together fashion brands with technology partners to create proof of concept projects which could show to the industry different ways of doing things, or blended ways of kind of adopting digital practice within traditional ones and creating an industry that is much more environmentally friendly and also inclusive. So one of the examples that I was recently reading, DressX recently had a report, and they said they figured out that polyester, for example, is a material that takes 200 years to decompose in nature, whereas a digital fashion garment, you just need to archive it on your feed for it to decompose. So raises really interesting questions of the fact of how we can incorporate digital practice to be able to create an industry that is much more environmentally friendly. We can replace materials. As Ashwini said before, we have the freedom when working in the digital realm to create anything we want and to basically approach layers of abstraction that are impossible to approach in the physical world. So what if we basically kind of replace some materials with digital practices? This is an interesting approach. We also don't believe that digital fashion can completely replace physical fashion. Fashion is a lot about tangibility. However, this kind of blended approach between the two could lead to a much more environmentally friendly industry. Another example would be we've done a lot of work in regards to digital fashion shows and catwalk presentations that are of a different character by using technology such as virtual production or virtual reality and 3D visualizations. So basically, another really interesting question is why host 3 physical fashion shows per year for fashion brands, whereas at the same time they could host like 1 physical show and then the rest could be digital. And the value to that is great because first of all, the damage to the environment is minimal. Consider the amounts of flights that you need in order to bring people to a particular physical location, but also sometimes the set design can be very damaging to the environment. Also, a really interesting point in that as well is the fact that through a digital presentation, you have the power to distribute this experience to unlimitless end users. And fashion in that way is shifting a bit away from the elite character that was tightly connected with it, because a traditional catwalk show is an event just for a few people. So I think, again, that there is the value where by adopting digital practices can bring to fashion. Recently, we also did a project which was called Collaborative XR, and it can show us how we can do, for example, fashion suits in a different way. So for this project, we realized this project in collaboration with Yahoo Creative Studios and hybrid fashion brand called eBit, which is really connected to mental health as well. And for this particular project, we actually created a fashion suit entirely digitally in a purely digital environment. So all the stakeholders that were taking part in this project, like the photographer, the art director, the model, the client, were all immersed into the same virtual reality environment from any part that they were in the world. And they were able to direct a fashion model who was driving a virtual character. So we used real-time cloth simulation and motion capture for that project. And all of the fashion suit was done in virtual reality. First of all, like what you observe through that is the simplicity of things. So for example, we could change locations with the simplicity of just one click. We were also able to use different weather effects very quickly. We didn't have to move crews and stuff between different locations. And then again, I'm not saying that this can completely replace fashion shoots as they used to be. However, this blended approach by bringing in insight from a digital and emerging practice can create an industry that is much more inclusive and environmentally friendly.
Oh, wow, amazing. Thank you so much, Kostas. It's fascinating.
Thank you.
So for my third and final question, aimed towards James and Mary, where I personally see digital fashion having the biggest impact in regards to the environment is in mitigating the hashtag outfit of the day trend on social media. According to a study by Barclays, almost 1 in 10 people admit to buying clothes to post photos of them being worn once before returning or discarding them. I'm sure that's a statistic I've come across before. And now instead shoppers can buy digital fashion. So aside from mitigating this outfit of the day trend, where else do you, Mary and James, see digital fashion having a positive impact on the environment?
Shall I go first?
Go for it.
Yeah, I think from the production side, I sort of agree with Kostas that it's really effective when used in conjunction with traditional techniques already. So just an example, if we get a prototype from the factory, a physical prototype, and it's not fitting how we'd like it to, or it's not looking exactly right, we can build it digitally in Clo and manipulate it and try lots of different things and digitally sort of cut the sample up without touching the actual proto. And then when we're happy with the digital sample, you know, we can communicate those changes to the factory, and we haven't used any fabric, we haven't cut up, you know, a valuable prototype. So, you know, we're really saving a lot of fabric that way, which is obviously, you know, great for the environment. So it takes away that risk factor, I think. And it's also effective, I think, when it's used with other sustainable sort of working practices, like, for example, zero waste pattern cutting. I know Holly McQuillan, the researcher, has done lots of work into draping in Clo in a zero waste way. So it can be sort of combined with other working practices really effectively, I think.
Amazing. Thanks, Mary. And James, have you got anything to say on that?
I think the only thing I'd add is just, I think as a human race, I think we are far more environmentally conscious than we've ever been before. I think you just have to, every time I turn the television on, or certainly in the past couple of weeks, there's been COP26 news and reports that have been making it to mainstream media. I call it the Greta Thunberg effect, where, you know, Gen Z consumers especially are natural born activists, and when they're looking at brands, part of their decision-making process boils down to how sustainable a brand is. I think on a personal level, I don't know about you guys, but the amount of recycling boxes I have to fill out every Tuesday evening for Wednesday morning seems to be increasing on a daily basis. And I think it's just part and parcel of how we're living now. So I think we are, as I say, we're far more environmentally conscious than ever before. The issue is that we're also, I think we still live in this kind of you call it a wear it once or outfit of the day kind of wear it once society, that kind of disposable living where if something breaks, we just replace it. And I think that we need to shift away from that. And I think digital clothing offers a good alternative for that wear it once culture where consumers are able to look good, again, as I said earlier, on social media or online at you know, no expense to the planet. And you know, I think that's something that Gen Z consumers are very keen on doing. The other thing I would say is that there are lots of brands out there that treat kind of environmental impact and sustainability as a box ticking.
Oh, looks like we've lost James.
We lost James for a minute. He'll be back.
His response. Anyway, so I'm happy to pass on over to Julianne for the social impact of digital fashion.
Yes, thanks, Owen. So much has happened in digital fashion the last year due to the pandemic. The market is growing at an immense rate, causing a big demand for digital fashion designs. Many fashion design students and designers were forced to adapt and transfer their fashion design practice from the physical into the digital space in 2020. Many of these young designers, most of them with not much business experience and any know-how on legal issues, were picked up straight from uni. But to what conditions? Are they paid properly? Do they get a piece of the cake? And most importantly, do they talk to each other to exchange information about fees and other issues and share their experiences? What lesson can we learn from the fast fashion industry? What could be safeguards to prevent exploration, and how could they be implemented? Or is it time maybe for a global digital fashion designers union? I wanted to ask all of you and ask with a general question. Is there a standard rate for digital fashion designs right now? Or is there a going rate, so to say, right now to everyone of our wonderful guests?
I don't, not in my experience there isn't. I think you pay based on the work that is required, and different garments, for example, require different skill sets. So I think it's very difficult to come up with a standard rate of pay. Also, you pay different people based on their experience as well, right?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I think number of hours it takes as well. So.
And adding to that, I think that it also depends a lot on the usage of the asset that you are getting, because is it just like you get the design and somebody superimposes it on top of your picture, or are you getting a 3D asset which you can then manipulate in a 3D software, for example? So that again raises questions around where do you use that product, that asset?
Correct. Yeah. One point I'd add about this, and I guest lecture at quite a few universities. For me, there is a fundamental issue that digital fashion is not at the moment, certainly in the UK, on the mainstream kind of curriculums at a lot of universities. So a lot of the people, certainly when we sort of hired people, you're generally hiring people that are kind of self-taught as well. So that, I think, puts an added level of complexity in when you're looking at how much you pay resource or within this area, because there isn't necessarily a whole set of qualifications associated with the industry yet.
Yeah, but it's really early days, isn't it? And I can just agree. I mean, it's not much happening in the curriculum in the rest. I mean, like in Germany here, for example. I mean, no one has a clue, and we have the situation that the students teach the professors, so to say. You know, it's a generation thing as well.
But it's exactly the same in the UK. So I guest lecture at universities, and one of the reasons why I seem to get called into universities is because the students are crying out for this, but the lecturers aren't able to talk to them or teach them about it, so they have to rely on third parties coming in to do that. And that's I think there needs to be a significant change, I think, at that kind of grassroots level for sure.
Yeah. Thanks, James. Thanks, Costa. Marin, Ashwini, if I ask both of you, you're fashion designers or digital fashion designers, did you have any bad experiences or any bad offers yet?
I would say in my experience, when I came out from my MA and I was looking for a job, companies really value the skills of graduate designers who have the ability to use digital sampling software. And it was something that came up in quite a few interviews, actually. And it's because it's an area that a lot of brands are really keen to get into because of the sustainability and financial considerations as well. Obviously, you're saving a lot of money if you're not constantly prototyping physically all the time. But, you know, as I think was previously said, the skills are still pretty rare in the industry. So if you do have the skills, you know, it's very valuable. And in terms of just the point about talking with colleagues and things, or fellow students that was said earlier, do we sort of share knowledge and whatever? All I would say about that is that what I've experienced is there's a really nice culture of sharing knowledge within the digital fashion space, and I've learned a lot from, you know, my fellow students and, you know, team members on special projects. So that's been my experience, really.
That's great to hear, Mary. Great. And Ashwini, do you have
I
any?
definitely agree with what Mary says, but I also think because it's such a new space, there's still a lot of educating to be done because it is obviously a very valuable skill set, but there are also lots of companies that don't fully understand it. So I have had, when I was freelancing previously, experiences where people expect things that are not really doable. They don't fully understand what digital fashion can and cannot do. And regarding payment as well, they don't fully understand the amount of effort it takes to make a digital garment, for instance, how many hours it might take. That's not something that, you know, because it's so new, they don't really have a knowledge of that. And so there is, you know, the occasional offer that comes in that is like a ridiculously low price and things. And you have to kind of explain to them your workflow and explain why you're going to have to charge much more than that, or why you can't do a certain thing that they asked you to do. But yeah, I think that's very much around education, around kind of when this becomes more popular, as it becomes more popular, I think companies will start to understand that better. And for me, I've also found, because at one point when I was freelancing, I wasn't sure myself how much to charge people. You know, if people came in with a really low offer, I'd just take it because I didn't really know how much I should be charging. But then I got onto a group called the Digi Girls group. And I found that to be quite useful because there were a lot of digital designers on that. And I was kind of hearing how much the, you know, hourly rate is, how much people are charging to make a complex dress versus a simple dress and things like that. And that kind of gave me a bit more confidence about, okay, this is the amount that I should be asking for. This is, you know, based on the effort that I'm putting in, the amount that I should be getting from a company. So I think, yeah, it is really useful to kind of be able to discuss that with other designers and just know that you're not undercharging or overcharging, and just what to expect, really.
Great. I mean, it's great to hear that there's some really good conversation going on and that there's not really a race to the bottom yet, like we see it in fast fashion. So, I mean, I think that's really great to hear. Kostas, you are with the Fashion Innovation Agency and you work closely with students and graduates. Do you think they get enough training on the business and legal side before entering this heated market?
I definitely think that there's still work to be done. However, like there's lots of things that are currently being done as well. And for me, the most fascinating thing is like kind of seeing and witnessing how a new generation of creatives are kind of elevating traditional practice and acquiring new skills. Because I think the most important thing is not for everyone to be able to use this software, but for people to be able to understand what can be done creatively and visually with those softwares, because they're going to be part of an industry in which they would need to cross-collaborate and understand like different skill sets and jobs and be able to adapt in an environment like that. One thing that is really important is the fact that I've seen, like from interacting with different students, the fact that we have a very big number of people who are completely self-taught. And there is this open source metaverse ecosystem that is being cultivated where knowledge and resources and technical resources are available online. And if you learn, I think that the university's role is more about like kind of helping students to navigate that environment, because it's about inspiring them. And then you would need to practically, of course, you would need to have facilities to practice your skills, but also if you do not navigate that space on your own, it's impossible for you, in my opinion, to become very well trained in regards to this software. And I think that this part, making this knowledge accessible, widely distributed and available to literally everyone, is something that we need to maintain, because only then we will be able to empower each individual creative in any part of the world and from any cultural background to have the opportunity to influence the international fashion landscape. And this for me is not only just fascinating, but it's utterly democratic and inclusive. And it's the only way to create positive change, establish more sustainable models, and make fashion a better industry for the future. We've done like lots of projects which are student-faced. We did a project where we collaborated with MIT, and we brought together a very diverse student group. Students were originating from traditional fashion design to pattern cutting, but also strategic fashion marketing, fashion curation. And what we observed through this course, no one of the students had any prior understanding, for example, of artificial intelligence, but eventually the technology, AI, became the connecting line between all of these different practices and the language that the students were using to basically cross-collaborate and learn from each other. And I think that these ways of collaborating and learning new skills are extremely important.
Yeah, really interesting. I mean, we see that from our fashion hackathons that we organize, like the more diverse the participants are, the better the results, so to say. So I think in that sense, really interesting that it's live in your area as well.
Yeah, and also it's really beautiful to see how students, like for example, fashion. I recently had a chat today actually with a fashion design student, traditional fashion design, and she was experimenting. Like she started working with cloth 3D and digital design. Then she moved towards creating patterns for cloth through artificial intelligence. Then she works on animated materials in Blender. So like you could see like the wide spectrum of different techniques that she has been experimenting with. All of the resources were available online for her. But also for me, it's really, really exciting to see these kinds of things because it shows us that you don't have to be a tech expert to be able to adapt in this ever-changing landscape. And I think that's what we need to cultivate to younger generations and to students. But the more you try it, the easier it becomes, and anyone can do it. Yeah, I think that's about it.
Great, thanks, Costa. James, my next question is to you. You work with digital fashion designers, or you employ digital fashion designers. Do you work mainly with freelancers or full-time employed designers? And what do you offer the designers that makes them work for you and not the competition?
Oh wow, good question. So we have our own in-house team, but we also work with freelancers. I think we are a semi-established brand in the digital fashion space. So actually we get approached, and so a lot of people want to work with us. So I receive sometimes 4 or 5, CVs or speculative emails a week from digital designers. I think a lot of it, going back to what people have said, a lot of these designers are self-taught, and I think a lot of them are looking for a platform and a brand to sort of take them in. So there's no shortage of offers of people wanting work. I think the difficulty or the challenge is finding the good amongst the offers that we get coming in. So a lot of them are still very young and still quite inexperienced. I firmly believe that being a good digital designer is a very it's a very good skill set to have, and good digital designers are hard to find and hard to come by.
Yeah, I'm really happy we have 2 really, really good ones here with us today. Thanks.
Yeah, we are,
Thanks.
of course.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, James, right. Thanks for your answers, guys. Of course, there's so much more to cover, and I think we all agree that there's room to improve and a need to act now and join forces in order to keep this information democratic and going, so to say. There's so much to cover on the topics of social sustainability, like inclusion and digital identities, but I think that's definitely another event. But we will continue this conversation, and watch this place, please, literally, because we are planning already more talks and initiatives on the sustainable issues of digital fashion in this space. So stay tuned. But as Christina mentioned in the beginning, in preparation for this IAM Weekend event, we, Ashwini, Paula, and myself, we co-created a data visualization. And we would now like to take you to another area to show you a really cool display of data. So Christina is going to summon all of us. So don't be shocked or surprised if you're being taken into another area. It doesn't hurt, don't worry.
Another technical. Bear with me.
So this is, as I said, in preparation for this IAM Weekend event, we co-created a data visualization. And the Munich-based company Aitaro supported us in training a neural network. A big thank you to Elias and Johannes from Aitaro team for their great support. And when talking about sustainable fashion, there's almost unimaginable claim from the World Bank report from 2019 that the global fashion industry is responsible for 10% of the global CO2 emissions. Owen mentioned that already. That's more than all the air travel and shipping combined. That is a very high number just for fashion. But just as we speak, global leaders and decision makers are meeting with their negotiators at the COP26 summit in Glasgow to try to limit the global warming to a maximum of 1.5 Celsius degrees. This won't be possible without reducing the CO2 consumption. That's why we came up with this idea of displaying a data visualization of CO2 emissions on a digital garment. Our goal was to develop an AI that can predict the worst case scenarios for CO2 emissions in the coming years. To predict or to calculate the future using AI, we had to look to the past. To do this, we decided to use data from the year 1970 onwards, so just after the introduction of the industrial weaving and just before the development of industrial spinning machines. These are the two technologies who made industrial fashion production with its power structures, exploitation of resources and workforces, growth rates and high consumption possible in the first place. The industrial manufacturing of fashion also started in areas like Glasgow, the place where it's been decided right now how livable this planet will be for any living organisms in the long run. Over to Paula now to tell you how we trained the system.
Thank you, Juliane. So the data to be visualized is calculated by an AI. Okay, AI is a very elastic term by which everyone understands something different. In this framework, we want to speak of AI in the sense of machine learning. To do this, we search for suitable data sets, and on the website Kaggle, a kind of Google for data sets, we found a data set containing the columns country, year, and CO2 emissions, i.e. information about the annual CO2 emissions of all individual countries worldwide. From this, I created a new data set containing the annual CO2 emissions worldwide since the beginning of the industrial fashion industry in 1750. This data was entered as input into the machine learning model. Our goal was to create a software that learns the pattern of this data set. Once it learns this, it can apply this pattern to future years and thus predict the outcome for CO2 emissions in subsequent years if the emissions do not change, i.e. a worst case scenario. In collaboration with Elias from Aitaro, like Juliane mentioned before, we trained a neural network whose algorithm is based on simple statistical calculations to mimic human learning. After training and optimizing the network, we were able to use it to predict the annual CO2 emissions for the next few years in gigatons, assuming that we humans do not change our behavior and continue to live as we do now. So now to Ashwini.
So we wanted to visualize and communicate the data that Paula researched and built a model for in a really interesting, unique way that has an impact on the layman. So this garment is digitally designed and created and sewn and animated in 3D using Clo 3D. And the results of the AI and the numbers that relate to the amount of carbon emissions at each decade were provided to me by Paula from 1950 through to 2030, which is a predicted amount. The number of lights that you see on the garment represent this data. So starting from 1950, you can see the number of lights increase massively over the decades by the end of the video. The decades that, in fact, we've been around to see. So the emissions that you and I have contributed to with many of our choices, including our fashion choices. So when we play this video again, we want you to take a moment to reflect on that and just watch this visualization and think about your impact and how that can be reduced. As you can see, it starts off with very few red lights and goes on to many, many more.
There we have it. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming, and thank you to our amazing expert speakers for joining us. It has been a pleasure to be part of the IAM Weekend. And if you want to find out more about the DMC, our Insta is the Digital Maker Collective, and our website is digitalmakercollective.org. Thank you very much, and see you guys soon.
Woo. Thank you so much again, guys, for coming.
Yeah, thanks, everyone.
Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, nice to be here. Thank you for everything.
Thank you for coming.
Hopefully see you soon.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Yeah, have a great week, everyone. Bye.
Yeah, have a nice evening. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Take care. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.